The deadline is looming to get our smoking rate down to less than 5% of the population. We're not going to make it, because to reach that smoke-free 2025 target, we need 120,000 people to quit smoking in the next 34 days. Some say we should celebrate what we have achieved and rubbish the latest rankings in the Global Tobacco Industry Interference Index, which has seen us plummet from 2nd to 53rd place. So have we failed?
It's come down, and spectacularly so, I think, for certain population groups. If I was living in a high-income Auckland suburb, female, European, I've already reached the goal.
Not so Māori. That rate has stalled at 15%, and Pacifica more than 10%.
We've got an absolute failure, and I think the present government's been particularly bad at doing it, but an absolute failure in addressing these ongoing smoking disparities, which are entirely preventable.
I'm Sharon Brett-Kelly, and today on The Detail, why we've failed to hit the target, plus the threats to a future smoke-free Aotearoa goal. We're talking gangs and black market tobacco already present in Australia.
Firebombings, violent turf wars, and even murder. This is the front line of Australia's flourishing illegal tobacco trade.
The comeback of smoking on screen.
Smoking a cigarette is one of the hottest things you can do as a man.
Don't you sometimes just want a cigarette? But God, there's just something so classy about just whipping out a durry and having a puff.
And tempting new products.
Nicotine drinks, nicotine gummy bears, you name it. You just shove nicotine in it and you've got a hooked population.
New figures from the annual New Zealand Health Survey show 6.8% of adults smoke daily. That's down a smidge from last year, but quite a drop from 11.9% in 2020. More men than women smoke, and the gap is getting wider. But dig into these numbers, and that's where you see the inequities. Today, 3 experts tell me why we didn't hit the smoke-free target and what's next. First, Auckland University Professor Chris Bullen has been dedicated to the battle to end smoking in New Zealand for 20 years.
And I first got interested in it when I was doing research on housing and health. And as a GP in South Auckland, I was aware that a lot of the health problems I was seeing in children coming into the clinic were due to parents smoking in homes. And then we bought a home in Auckland, and it was a deceased estate, and the woman had died of lung cancer, and there was nicotine coating the walls, and whenever the weather changed we could smell it coming out of the carpet. It was deeply embedded in the fabric of the house. In the same way, I guess smoking's been deeply embedded in the fabric of many New Zealanders.
So you were doing this work when the Smoke-Free 2025 first was introduced in 2011?
2011, 12, 13, there was, there was the Māori Affairs Select Committee hearing, which was foundational in setting that goal.
Was that like a major breakthrough?
Yeah, I think it was a really an important lesson for me, was that setting goals and targets can be very powerful. But it was also a lesson in, it seemed so far away that for politicians on a 3-year electoral cycle, it was somebody else's issue to grapple with. And so I guess they just thought they'd get a free ride because smoking was, going out of fashion. And they perhaps hoped that by 2025 it'd be a thing of the past. But of course it's not.
No.
And so there's been a lot of incremental changes over the years that have led to where we've got to. But it really wasn't until Aisha Verrill took up the cause several years ago and said, well, 2025 is almost upon us, we need to do something. And that's where the action plan was promoted and became law very briefly, until it was repealed when the coalition government took power.
One of the government's new policies to ditch part of our smoke-free plan is making waves here and overseas.
The countries like the UK followed our lead, so now the backtrack is capturing international headlines.
Do you blame the repeal of the smoke-free action plan for us being unable to reach that 5% goal?
In part. The problem with the Act is some of the actions wouldn't have taken effect by now anyway.
I call the Honourable Casey Costello.
Mr Speaker,
The bill removes the previous government's policies in 3 areas primarily. To cut by 90% the number of retailers that could sell smoked tobacco products, which was to happen later this year, introduce a low nicotine limit, which was to happen next year, ban sales to all those born after the 1st of January 2009 that was planned to take effect in 2027.
So I think it was a good plan, but it really was given life and power legislatively probably too late. It was a lot of time was spent, I believe, on trying to reduce the number of tobacco outlets, just the working through all the regulatory hurdles there, and probably not enough on the denicotinisation strategy, which all the research overseas in New Zealand, the modelling of what might it look like if it was put in place, was going to do the heavy lifting. That strategy of giving people the choice still of smoking, but the only smoking that they could do would be nicotine-free tobacco. That would have, according to the modelling, been the most pro-equity strategy of the lot.
There was an editorial in the Herald the other day talking about Smokefree, and it pointed out that about 5,000 people a year die from smoking-related diseases.
Correct.
Is that still the case?
Well, it's an estimate, and it's an estimate that's about a decade or more old. But, smoking-related harm has a long tail. I think it would be good to rerun those estimates, given that when that was first done, we're probably the smoking prevalence has halved. So it may be a little bit less, but even so, that's a lot of people. When we talk about these numbers, they become statistics and we lose sight of the individual suffering for those people and their whānau and the costs and all of those other ways we measure things. So that's a lot of people. That's a lot of plane crashes. That's a lot of car crashes every year. And that has, huge impact on society.
Just getting back to these numbers, the statistics on who's still smoking, if we can't blame the repeal of the Smoke-Free Action Plan entirely on those persistently high numbers, what else has been going on or hasn't been going on in the last 2 years to bring those numbers down even more? Yeah,
I think, the fact that the government repealed a policy that was supported by the majority of New Zealanders in polling, by the vast majority of healthcare professionals. You saw the people mobilised in the streets with placards after the repeal.
I don't know what the government's thinking by doing this. It's an absolute disgrace and we must make as much noise as possible to stop this.
Just fight! Listen, do your job, right?
For the government to do that, it sent a message to people who were smoking to say, our foot's gone off the accelerator pedal. Maybe it's not so bad. I know that's not the message they said, but it was a subtle, you could take that message from it, that, the government's not so worried about smoking and, the emphasis isn't going to be there as much as it was. And I know that the removal of the targets for GPs and hospitals to give brief advice and support for people to quit smoking when they came through their doors, that was also, that went. Different governments do these things for various other reasons, but that has had a measurable decline in the number of referrals coming to smoking cessation services from GPs. So I think the whole system has to work together, and I don't think we've had a coordinated, focused system that's really messaged loudly that we have got a goal as a nation, and it's something we can do collectively to support each other to get to that goal. That voice hasn't been shouted loudly enough.
Demonstrators handed in a petition at Parliament.
A petition with tens of thousands of signatures urging the government not to proceed was being presented.
Denicotisation's all at risk. Everything's at risk right now, and it's a horrible predicament for Tiwi Māori, but also for New Zealand as a whole.
Because our country don't want cigarettes, they don't want smoking.
Yeah, what we did help lead out a petition, which was People Over Profit. We got over 50,000 signatures on that petition and took that to Parliament.
Jasmine Graham is General Manager of Hāpai te Hauora, the largest Māori health provider. It holds the contract for National Tobacco Control Advocacy, which makes sure the government listens to Māori and Pacifica in particular when it comes to smoke-free policies and programs. But in spite of the petition and the protests, the government went ahead with the removal of smoke-free protections.
The ongoing outrage hasn't convinced the decision makers.
In my view, it's time for the government to let people start making their own choices and not have 5 million people living in a nanny state.
We don't support the policy because we don't think actually limiting distribution to drive a black market and to try and encourage more ram raids and crime is the way forward.
Just going back to that first question, you know, the 15% still smoking among Māori population, which is far away from the Smokefree 2025 goal. Did you ever think we were going to get there?
I have to. I really have to. When talking to whānau on the ground and working with people who are really committed to seeing a smoke-free Aotearoa, I think we had some real world-leading legislation in place to be able to give our very best effort to achieve that goal, which would have been probably a different conversation than what we're having today. But I guess we just won't know that.
Have we failed?
I think we're accountable. But I think to say that we've failed, I wouldn't want to discredit all of those that have quit smoking up until this point, that through all of this movement, we have seen so many Māori and Pacific people step into a life that's free from the harms of tobacco, that's free from having to smoke through this addiction. I wouldn't call it a failure. I think we just haven't reached the goal.
What was it then? What happened?
I guess I can talk to the more recent decisions that were made in, I think, definitely stalling that progress and us reaching that point, which largely was around the repeal of SERPA, which was the legislation around the three main points, which was retail reduction, smoke-free generation, and denicotinisation.
But what about the wraparound services? I mean, there are a number of programs, as you've said. There's actually millions of dollars that's being spent on different smoking cessation programs. So are they not working?
Oh, they are absolutely working. I think the thing is that it can't be looked at in silo. I think that where we have our cessation services that are working really hard and working really well and being able to provide a smoke-free pathway to be able to walk that quit journey with someone who is really battling the addiction to nicotine through these products is it can't be just left on the shoulders of our cessation services. It can't just be left on the shoulders of health promotion. It needs to be backed and also supported by some strong legislations and policies to be able to also support the efforts, because it's not just about, so our cessation services, they're trying to help people to stop smoking. We can put policies in place that prevent people from starting.
You need the legislation to back it up.
Yeah.
Alongside getting people off cigarettes is the nicotine addiction. So what do you think about addressing that? Because vaping is a controversial area, isn't it? Vaping as the alternative.
Yeah, it is controversial, even talking within our sector alone, when looking at it as a cessation tool and also seeing the harm that it's doing with our young people and those that have never smoked. So I think that we need to, in that sense, be looking at the industry and putting focus on the industry that are creating these products, because if it's not cigarettes or vapes, like what are the other products that they're bringing in to pathway away to addiction through nicotine? So I think one thing that we have learned is that, again, talking about silos, we can't look at it in silo. We have to actually look a little bit further back and think, actually, there's an industry that's creating these products that are designed to addict and then kill our people. So let's put some focus there and make sure that we're getting, again, I keep going back to policies, but being able to protect us from the influence of the industry, be able to protect our people from the products of this industry. And I think that in the larger conversation around vapes and nicotine as a whole is where we're looking as Hāpai, is pointing it back to the industry and saying enough's enough. We don't need any more of these products.
Here's how Associate Health Minister Casey Costello sees the latest figures on smoking.
we've achieved the low-hanging fruit. We've now got those hardcore long-term smokers, which we saw last year as well. The upside of this is that, our young smoking rate is below 3.2, and that is, exactly what we wanted to see. We wanted our young people not to start, and that's the best news.
But there are new risks for young people to get hooked. Go to a party these days and you're more likely to be passed a tin of nicotine pouches than a much more expensive cigarette. Anaru Waa worries that's just the start of a new wave of highly addictive products targeting youth. He's Associate Professor at Otago University based in Wellington, and his research focuses on how we can eliminate tobacco-related harm among whānau Māori.
Plausibly, you could get nicotine drinks, nicotine gummy bears, you name it. You just shove nicotine in it and you've got a hooked population. So, and these aren't like nicotine replacement therapy with low nicotine that gets you off. These are, again, like stuff that you'll use. And nicotine, it's known to be, it's a very highly addictive drug. And the industry's got awfully good at making it palatable and easy to get addicted to very quickly. And you tend to have this sort of addiction for life. It's highly reinforcing. So years on, somebody might try these things again and suddenly get hooked on again. But also, it's not really knowing how it affects, let's say, mothers who are pregnant. So many ongoing impacts we don't know about, or we do know about, but these are things that the industry designs, in its favour. And our policies aren't anywhere close to catching up with them yet at the moment, I think.
What's next? What comes after Smokefree 2025?
I think the way to achieve the goal and actually, address what is an epidemic is to return, the measures that will see our smoking rates drop. So things like, whether tobacco should be sold at all in this country and what form, whether they should have, be non-addictive. But I also think that if you put the squeeze on smoked tobacco, it tends to sort of burst somewhere else and the industry will just morph into other products. And we've seen that with, the explosion of vaping. For some people who can't quit, it might be, an alternative, but we also know that most of the people taking up vapes are, youth and young adults, and a lot of them have never smoked at all. So these are sort of the new generation of people using nicotine products. And I'm thinking in like 20 or 30 years' time, they'll wonder why they were thrown under the bus at a time when we could have prevented that. So I think we need really strong policies around controlling vaping and other nicotine products at the same time as tobacco, just to make sure that, the industry just doesn't morph into something else.
If you're trying to get people off cigarettes, surely there has to be an alternative.
Well, I think in this case of vapes, we say a less harmful alternative because, if we had no nicotine products in Aotearoa and someone tried to introduce vapes, the harm that we think vapes might cause would never allow them to be sold in the first instance. They would only be allowed, they're only being thought of because tobacco's here. So, yes, we need to make sure that we have this idea of monarchy and supporting those who smoke to quit, especially if we had was being pushed by measures that might see the end of sales of smoked tobacco. But I think we really got to think about, well, how far does that go? Does it mean it's going to be available on every street corner? Does it mean that we need this whole rainbow of flavours? Does it mean we need products actually tailored to be highly addictive and highly concealable, which actually probably work better for young people? Does it mean that it has to be so cheap? I mean, a vaping product will last, you don't have to go to the dairy every day to buy one. It's like shopping. You might go once a week or whatever, but we don't have a supermarket on every corner. We have them, doesn't have to be that accessible. I don't think we're having that discussion, but what's the threshold to make them available for people who want to quit? But also, I don't think they should be available by people who aren't health professionals who know the context of helping people to quit. The people who are selling them have a vested interest to sell more of them because that's what their profit model depends on.
Is there value in the Smokefree Aotearoa brand, I suppose, and extending it now to 2030, say?
I would say that there is. I'd also say that I've worked with the term smoke-free for many years, but I think we should move beyond that for a couple of reasons. Is because we're not just talking like smoked tobacco. We need to think about other products which are addicting young people and what we can do about that. And so we need to think about nicotine-free Aotearoa. So I think, the industry itself is appropriating a lot of our terms. So they use the term smoke-free in their language, which generally is interpreted to say, don't smoke, but use our nicotine products, which aren't just vapes. They can be heated tobacco products, which this government seems to be supporting as well.
The government came under fire for cutting the excise tax on heated tobacco products last year, saying they were a stop smoking aid.
The benefits go to people who have alternative products to quit smoking, and that's the target, and it always has been the target.
what we want to do is stop the exploitation of nicotine addiction. So it's big tobacco, big nicotine coming in, exploiting. But we've got to be careful we don't suddenly make smoking itself illegal, because you end up in a different space. But I certainly think the exploitative tactics of this nicotine industry is what we need to target. So get the big players out of it, and that'll get us pretty close. In fact, I'm pretty sure to get close to zero anyway.
Chris Bullen wants the priority to remain on ending the use of cigarettes with their chemical cocktail. He's also closely watching the illegal tobacco and vape market in Australia and signs of it spreading here. But he does agree with Anaru on a need for transparency when it comes to tobacco companies.
Unless we deal with that issue, our governments won't deal boldly and courageously. They will continue to be influenced by either unknowingly, naively, or perhaps even, sadly, directly through tobacco industry influence. The tobacco industry has lobbyists here in New Zealand. They pay these people very well. Their job is to dampen down, tough policies, whether it be in tobacco or other things. But in the tobacco space, we see their kind of talking points being replicated in the very words of some of our parliamentarians.
Casey Costello takes issue with that.
I can give 100% assurance. I have been completely transparent in everything. My diary is fully released. Every meeting, every paper has been released. And every piece of work I have continued to engage. And the recent Smokefree advisory group we set up engaged with all of those groups, all of the lobby groups that have concerns. They have been involved. Their advice has been sought. They have provided a report, and that will be published later this month.
So do you talk to tobacco companies on this stuff?
I have not ever spoken to a tobacco company about these initiatives.
There's also a revolving door between the industry and people appearing in to represent us in Parliament. And I think these are things that should be shut down. I think in general they're bad for good open democracy. So it's not just about tobacco, it's in our food and other industries, alcohol, where there's money to be made and there's harm from some of those products possible. Those industries are only interested in money. They don't care about the harm. We care about the harm, and so we want government to take strong action to make things, their conversations, their meetings, their documents, much more transparent and publicly available, so that there is not just the appearance of good government, but it actually is open government.
That's it for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. Thank you to Chris Bullen, Anaru Waa and Jasmine Graham. This episode was engineered by Alex Harmer and produced by Alexia Russell. I'm Sharon Brett Kelly. Mā te wā.